see you.
Avatar: Fire and Ash is now streaming on Disney+. It's the film critics are calling the best Avatar yet.
Yeah! Go, 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 go!
A true epic and completely jaw-dropping.
This is the only pure thing in this world.
Return to Pandora on Disney+.
It will be an adventure for the whole family.
And watch the Oscar-winning phenomenon at home.
This is sick!
Avatar: Fire and Ash, now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
It was interesting. Yeah, the significance of it is it just radically contradicts the standard picture of human origins and the entry of humans into North and South America. The current dominant idea is that the first humans entered the Americas coming over from what's now Siberia to Alaska by a land bridge that existed maybe 20,000 years ago. So they wouldn't expect the mainstream archaeologists that there should be anything older than 20,000, 25,000 years, perhaps. So it's really quite extraordinary that Ameghino made this discovery in Argentina.
And how are they sure that this is a human skull?
There are different metrics that are used to determine whether something is modern human or belongs to some more primitive human ape-like ancestors, of which there are many that have been discovered and labeled as such, like the Denisovans, the Neanderthals, Homo floresiensis, or the Hobbit from Indonesia. There are several human ancestors. Now, the critics, like Aleš Hrdlička, it's a Czech name, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but he came down from the Smithsonian Institute from Washington, D.C. to examine this case because he was very much into showing the faults and mistakes and any claims that skulls were very, very old in the Americas. So he determined it, by its metrics, is anatomically modern. And for him, that ruled out the possibility that it was perhaps as much as 2 million years old. So the anatomical specialists regard it as anatomically modern. It was found actually in the excavation of a harbor in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. They were excavating a dry dock where you could repair ships. So they had excavated below the surface to about 50 meters deep. And then they encountered a hard layer of what they call tosca, which means hard. It's a limestone formation. It completely sealed off the layer with the skeleton in it from the surface, which rules out one of the usual counter explanations for such discoveries, namely that they are intrusive burials, that they come from a very recent level, as they would expect if it was anatomically modern. So, but that layer of solid rock that sealed off the layer with the skeleton from the surface rules out that possibility that it was intrusive into the formation in which it was found, which has been dated as belonging to the period mentioned. Yeah, well, I think the evolution concept in general is a good one. Unfortunately, the term has been hijacked by modern physicalist, materialist science, and they have their particular vision about how it takes place. But they leave out consciousness. You know, if you believe that all there is to reality is matter in its various transformations, and you at the very beginning rule out any kind of non-material substance, and you rule out the possibility of any higher design or control, uh, then they're doing pretty well. Because if that's the only resources you're going to employ for your search for truth, then all you can hope for is that somehow or other, initially, material elements, molecules combine together to form some first living thing. And somehow or other, it transformed generation by generation, gradually becoming multicellular, uh, primitive plants and animals on that level. And then somehow or other, they later evolved into more complex beings. It's, but I think that they don't have all the parts of the kit. Say if you're going to build your own computer and you buy a kit, and it's missing some parts, and the instruction manual has been thrown away, then no matter what you do, you're never going to get a working computer, by figuring things out that way and just making use of the parts that you happen to have. You'll never get it. Just like today, scientists have no explanation for consciousness, how it arose from matter, according to their theories. And there are also various subtle energies associated with the human form. And then you have how did that happen? How did one species transform into another? They say by evolution, by genetic mutations, but if you actually look for a detailed explanation of how these things happen, it really isn't there. So I think Darwin had a good intuition that there is something connected with an organism that is directing what shape, what form its body should take. But I think he missed what is actually evolving. He thought it's the gross physical body made of matter that is evolving. But I think it's rather that the subtle material energies associated with an organism, the mind, intelligence, ego, these are subtle forms of material energy, and they stay with the conscious self. I think there's a conscious self that is different from the body, just like a driver is different from a car. Driver's in the car, he's got to take care of the car. That's how he interacts with the world. But really the driver is something completely separate from the car. It's just meant for a certain purpose. So all the different forms of life, single-celled animals and plants, more complex animals, plants, fish, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, insects, they're all determined by the state of the subtle mental body, which stays with a soul lifetime after lifetime through a process of reincarnation. So it's actually, there is an evolution of consciousness, an evolution of the soul as it gradually moves from one type of material body to another until it attains the human form. So I think Darwin had the correct intuition, but he didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle. So he mistakenly thought it's the gross physical body that's evolving, whereas the real fact is it's the soul evolving through different types of material bodies. When Darwin published his book, The Origin of Species, in 1859, scientists, archaeologists, and geologists principally, all over Europe began, and all over the world actually, began searching for this missing link. Darwin didn't talk about human evolution and origin of species, but everybody understood the implications that if life forms are evolving one from the other, there had to be some intermediate between very ancient apes that existed in the Eocene period, which is now about 40 to 50 million years ago, and anatomically modern humans. There had to be some intermediary. So they began searching for the missing link. But scientists from Germany, from England, from France, from Portugal, and many other countries were finding in very ancient layers not a missing link. They were finding evidence that humans like ourselves existed in these very ancient times. Actually, it wasn't until the 1890s, the end of the 19th century, that a Dutch researcher, Eugene Dubois, made excavations in Java, which is part of Indonesia, which was part of the Dutch colonial empire at that time. And he found a thigh bone or femur, and that was a little bit human-like, and an ape-like skull with thick brow ridges. The human, anatomically modern human form is, for the most part, the forehead is smooth. There's no big bone of ridge across the forehead over the eyes. So he put the two together, even though they were found 50 feet, about 15 meters apart, in an excavation that included hundreds of animal and plant bones. He put them together and said, this is our missing link. And this gradually became accepted in the scientific world, that now finally we have our missing link. And they had a date for it, 800,000 years, roughly. So when that was accepted as a missing link, then scientists had to decide, well, what are we going to do with all the other reports that have accumulated over the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s that show anatomically modern humans were present before the missing link? in formations millions of years old. So at that time, you could say a process of knowledge filtration began, whereby those older reports showing a very ancient human presence could be eliminated from the discourse of science. Nobody wanted to talk about them anymore. Gradually, they were forgotten and dismissed, sometimes on very flimsy grounds. So that evidence, that body of evidence disappeared. And that's one of the major things that I've done in this work is revive that evidence, and show that it was worthy of consideration. Another thing that happened was in the future, in the late 1890s, early 20th century, anything that was discovered that was looked anatomically modern human, that was older, the future discoveries, they were either interpreted in such a way that they fit the paradigm, or they were dismissed on very flimsy grounds. In the skull that we're talking about, the one that was discovered by Florentino Ameghino in Buenos Aires early in the 20th century, is an example of that. Elish Prudlichka said that if it's modern, it can't be old, that old, 2 million years old. So it was reinterpreted in that way. So it fit, the developing paradigm. Once I was on a lecture tour of Russia, and I was speaking at universities all over the country. And I spoke in Moscow at a major scientific institute. And after my talk, this former Russian naval officer came up to me and showed me this object. And if you look at it under not very high magnification, but it has to be magnified, you can see embedded in it the fabric. And it's hard to see how anyone could do that, that it's a hoax or a fake.
This episode is brought to you by Google Chrome. You think you know a browser, but Gemini and Chrome? That's new. It can help you with practically anything on the web, like restoring a vintage motorcycle from a 50-page restoration blog, or finally break down that long article you've had open for weeks. Gemini and Chrome is here for it. Ready to make anything online make sense? There's no place like Chrome. Check responses, setup required, compatibility and availability varies, 18+.
Chronic migraine is 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more.
Botox, onabotulinum toxin A, prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine before they start. It's not for those with 14 or fewer headache days a month. It prevents on average 8 to 9 headache days a month versus 6 to 7 for placebo.
Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Why wait? Ask your doctor, visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com, or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
I got from the officer the story of how he found it, and then carefully checked on the age of Baltic amber. from that region. And the dates for it are, as you were saying, 40 to 50 million years. So that's really kind of extraordinary. It's a very extreme anomaly in that sense. And it should be investigated, I think. One of the purposes of putting together books like Forbidden Archaeology and Extreme Human Antiquity is to bring these cases to the attention of current investigators so that either further research can be done to either confirm or deny the antiquity attributed to the object, or encourage other further research. Vedic cosmology is consciousness based,
Okay.
whereas the Western, modern scientific or Western, although it's practiced all over the world today, but we could say it's matter based. And I think that is not just a question of cosmology, but it's a question that applies to all of science, really, that there's this matter-based conception of the cosmos. And according to that, the cosmos really has no purpose. It's just there. It just happens somehow. The most common theory today is some variety of the Big Bang. The idea that the universe is expanding, and that means in the past it must have been contracting, and they believe it contracted to what's called the singularity, a very tiny, extremely dense, extremely hot concentration of matter. So that is the big difference. If we accept it's consciousness based, then that means or opens up the possibility that it has a purpose. It's not just that we're accidental creatures in an accidental universe. It becomes more like what is sometimes seen in modern science fiction films, like The Matrix, that we're existing in kind of a virtual reality system that is meant to educate us about our nature as beings of pure consciousness rather than just robots made of molecules. There are some interesting parallels between some modern scientific ideas and ideas that are part of the Vedic cosmology. Of course, as I said, the Vedic cosmology is consciousness based. So that is the idea that there's some transcendent conscious being that is responsible for the cosmos that we're in. And in the Vedic cosmology, there's the concept of a deity called Mahavishnu,
Mm.
who is lying on the causal ocean, floating on the causal ocean, and breathing in and breathing out. And when he breathes out, numberless universes come out from his body, and they're small to start out with, but they expand as he glances at them. So not only is the idea that a universe expands and contracts there in the Vedas, when Mahavishnu breathes in, the universes contract and re-enter his form. So not only is the idea that a universe expands and contracts found in the Vedic cosmology, was also the idea of multiverse, many universes. Uh, so, yes, the universe would disappear when Mahavishnu breathes out and the forms of universes emerge from his pores. There is what's called the primary creation of elements. And this again is a parallel with modern science. The progression of the elements, like in modern science, matter exists in different states. There's what's sometimes called the ether or the vacuum or space. And then there are gases. Then there's plasmas or fire. And from that, from the initial stars that are formed from gases, come heavier elements like water. It's pretty amazing that if we look at modern science, explain where water came from, there are stars that when they enter their supernova stage at the end of their existence, they emit heavier elements. Like they start out with hydrogen and helium, which are very simple gases. They emerge from time-space continuum or the vacuum or the ether, as it's sometimes called. And then the generations of stars, first they produce helium and hydrogen, and then as they advance through the generations, they develop heavier elements like the gases oxygen, and then later solid elements like iron and calcium, other elements. So one of the elements that emerged from stars is H2O, hydrogen, and the heavier atom, oxygen. So then comes water, and then later come the earth or solid elements. And the same progression is there in the Vedic cosmology. First comes ether, and then comes air or gases, then comes fire or plasma. Plasma is a superheated gas. So the sun is plasma, superheated gases. And then from that come comes water or liquids. And then from that come the solids. So it's a gradual progression. Very interesting parallel. So that in the first stages of the expansion of the universes that emerge from Mahavishnu, you get the same progression of elements from subtle to gross. First thing that has to exist is space to accommodate elements. If there were no space, you'd be in the singularity. That's so some expansion has to be there, and the expansion has to include the manifestation of space, which gives room for elements to interact. One thing that happens is when the universes expand, Mahavishnu injects into them conscious selves. They're called atmas, means conscious self. And religious terminology, you would call it a soul, an eternal soul. So they are injected into each expanding universe. And the reason they are injected into these universes is at the present moment, they're not qualified to exist on the level of pure consciousness. You could say, which should be the ground reality. They're injected into what I would call virtual realities in each universe. And to act in a universe, they require, first of all, a place to stand, a place to exist. Like, we exist on a planet, the Earth planet, on the land part of it. The Earth is 70% water surface. So we need a place to exist. And we also need a bodily vehicle made of matter.
Everyone knows that unexplainable it factor, that smile that lights up a room, that wow. Well, it doesn't happen by itself. There's chemistry behind the charisma. Colgate Optic White Pro Series toothpaste removes 15 years of deep-set stains when you brush twice daily for 2 weeks. How? The clinically proven formula is powered by Colgate's hydrogen peroxide complex. It works at the molecular level to gently dissolve stains deep within the enamel where your brush can't reach. It's proof that daily routine can be remarkable. That's the science of wow. Colgate Optic White.
Athletic Brewing Company crafts award-winning non-alcoholic beers for those who want to be part of every round. With over 185 flavor awards, they're exceptional NA beers that fit your lifestyle and any social occasion. Summer's full of good times, and Athletic fits right in. Go to athleticbrewing.com to have brews delivered to your door, or find them at a bar, restaurant, or store near you. Near beer. Athletic Brewing Company. Fit for all times.
Adapted to our level of consciousness. So there's a designer who designs the bodies and designs the places where we exist, where we can exist on this planet and other planets. So that kind of creator God is called Brahma. And he manifests these different lokas, like we have the word location. That means the place where we can exist. So these lokas, or planetary systems, are manifested by Brahma. Brahma has a lifetime. We're going to get to the answer to your question. Brahma has a lifetime. His day lasts 4,300,000,000 years. He has a night that lasts 4,300,000 years. 300 million, excuse me. So altogether, his one day is 8,600,000,000 years. If you multiply by 30, you get a month of Brahma. If you multiply 30 by 12, you get a year of Brahma. You multiply by 100, he lives for 100 of his years. It comes out, that's the lifetime of a Brahma. That's when the breath comes in. When Brahma is first manifest, Mahavishnu is breathing out. And then when the universe is wrapped up, he's breathing in. So Brahma exists for the time of that breath, which if you calculate it out, is 311,040,000,000,000 years. So that's the length of a breath of Mahavishnu in terms of our solar years. Beyond Mahavishnu, there is a realm where there is no destructive influence of time. Actually, each conscious self belongs in that timeless realm. It's only, and the ruling principle of that timeless level of existence is pure, loving, devotional harmony among all conscious entities and the source of all conscious entities, who is beyond Mahavishnu. Mahavishnu is an expansion of that supreme source, who goes under different names, but a very common name is Krishna. So Mahavishnu is an expansion of Krishna for the purpose of manifesting material universes for conscious selves who have a bit of selfishness, self-centeredness, a desire to control and exploit others. That can't happen on that spiritual level of pure consciousness. Only one thing goes on there. This cooperative, harmonious existence of conscious entities and their source. So if they want to do something else, they need a field of activity. So the material world is that. And the material worlds are manifested by Mahavishnu, who is sleeping and dreaming, you could say, on the causal ocean. So the purpose of the universe, these universes, is dual, two functions. To let a conscious self act out its desires to try to control, dominate, exploit other conscious entities and whatever material resources they can command. And just like we see, so many countries are trying to control the flow of oil and possession of oil in the Middle East. There's actually a whole huge war going on about it. So that is an activity in the material world. So either the conscious self can think, well, I am the temporary bodily vehicle that I'm falsely identifying with, and my purpose is to get as much as I can for myself, for my selfish purposes, either individually or collectively as nations or whatever. That's one purpose. The other purpose is to understand I'm not this bodily vehicle that I have to occupy right now. I am the soul. Not that I have a soul, but I am the soul. I am the conscious self. I'm not the temporary physical vehicle that I happen to occupy. And if a person is successful in realizing that, and every resource is given by Krishna to help a soul realize that. The Vedic literature is given, teachers are sent to this world. Sometimes Krishna himself comes as an avatar. Avatar means one who descends from a higher level to a lower level. So if a conscious self takes advantage of that opportunity, she may qualify themselves to enter that higher level reality. So these material universes have a purpose, and it's a dual purpose. And everything depends upon the free will of the individual conscious self. Yeah. Nobody is condemned eternally or liberated eternally. It depends on the decision of the conscious self.
Mm.
Everything in the Vedic cosmology is ultimately personal. It's not happening in a mechanistic way. So you could say it's like a ballet company. There may be behind the scenes a director, but everybody has to play their part. And there are all living entities, whether they're on the level of Shiva or Brahma or Vishnu, are expansions from Krishna ultimately. And Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva they have certain functions in the Vedic cosmology. The one you mentioned, Shiva is the destroyer. And the destruction takes place by his dancing and the music that accompanies the dancing. And, I think at CERN in Switzerland, they have an image of dancing Shiva, Nataraj, Lord of Dance, doing the final dance of destruction, which is a force. Scientists call it entropy, the tendency towards disintegration. So Shiva represents that. Brahma represents creation. And Vishnu is the maintainer. And they're associated with three modes of nature. Nature has a destructive aspect, to Shiva. Nature has a creative aspect, which is under the control of Brahma. And maintaining it and keeping it going and functioning is Vishnu.
That would be the Trinity.
It is a trinity.
Mm.
If we look at physics, history of physics, we find many of the founding fathers of quantum mechanics and those sorts of things were very interested in the Vedic texts. And at CERN, one of the major things they're doing is smashing atoms. Basically destroying them and seeing what comes out. So if you look at the types of people who are involved in physics and astrophysics, many of them are from Western origins, and they may have some interest in Vedic cosmology, some aspects of it in any case. And that's a historic fact. Then you have today involved in these disciplines many people of Indian heritage and different fields like that. So I don't know the actual story of who and why someone put that Shiva Nataraj sculpture, I think it's bronze, at CERN in Switzerland. But because it's actually a big mystery in science, because the laws of physics are actually reversible. And just like you're drinking a glass of water now, say if it had an ice cube in it, you would always find it's just as reasonable from the standpoint of the laws of physics that at room temperature, an ice cube could form in the glass of water that you had. But we see normally, practically in every instance, that doesn't happen. Rather, the ice cube melts and turns into
Water.
water.
Yeah.
And so, state of increasing entropy. And why things work like that is not very well understood. I think the concept of Shiva and the destructive force, the directionality of time, may be explained by Shiva.
Mm.
Well, Robert Oppenheimer pointed that out. Yeah, he was the American physicist who supervised the team that made the atomic bomb. And before it was used in Japan, it was tested in a place in New Mexico. And Robert Oppenheimer was in the bunker at that time. And they conducted the test and it worked. The atomic device exploded in a nuclear explosion. And he was asked, well, at the time the explosion went off, he said, he quoted a verse from Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the sacred texts of India. And he said, "Time I am, destroyer of all worlds." So that destructive force of time, he believed, was embodied in that nuclear explosion. And there are actually accounts in ancient Indian texts of a weapon that somewhat resembles atomic weapons in its effect. They were called brahmastras. So Oppenheimer was asked by a reporter, what did it feel like to be there at the first nuclear explosion? And Oppenheimer said to him, the first in modern times, indicating there had been previous examples of weapons very much like that.
Mm.
That appears to be the testimony of most cultures that have existed on Earth from ancient times to modern times. We seem to be an anomaly in our modern Western cultures that we don't accept those things. Although if we look at our roots, you can look at the European peoples, if you go back and trace out the roots of their ideas, you'll see that they had the idea, the ancient Greeks had the idea of gods, goddesses regularly interacting with humans. Germanic peoples had their concepts. Practically everyone had it. But it's gradually what happened, according to the Vedic histories, is that maybe about 5,000 years ago, people stopped doing the kinds of activities that attracted those higher beings to interact with humans.
And what was that they stopped doing?
And in essence, they stopped respecting these intermediate beings.
Ah, okay. Mm.
Offering them sacrifices for their pleasure. They just stopped doing those things. And I don't want to get into criticizing, different faiths and things like that. But in the Vedic concept, there was a supreme being, a supreme conscious, intelligent being who had an intermediate layer between humans and, the highest spiritual realm. And those were the demigods, which, if you look through, as I said, through the histories of most people, most cultures in the world, at some time they had a conscious belief in such things. And, as I said, if you go back a few thousand years and look at these cultures, they had that. Now, it survived even into Christianity. There were angels, different hierarchies of angels. And if you go back to some of the early Christian fathers of the church, they had the concept of angels in charge of the different elements, angels in charge of water, angels in charge of fiery objects like the sun and things like that. They had these intermediate beings. So what happened over time is that these, and this is connected with the rise of material science, is that these beings were gradually reduced to not very important. So they kind of stripped out the intermediate layer and just were left with a concept of God who somehow or other, not through intermediate beings connected with material phenomena, but just through maybe some physical laws that could be discovered by science. They kind of eliminated that whole intermediate layer of beings and were left with only a kind of deistic concept of God, that God started the whole thing, by establishing laws of physics, and then no further action needed. And then eventually they got rid of that too. So we're kind of left with as I said, the picture of we're accidental beings in an accidental universe made of matter. And we think we can do anything we want individually and collectively without taking into account some people do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's called there's religion in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So that kind of blood sacrifice that we see historical records of is not good. And actually, according to the Vedic cosmology, one shouldn't worship demigods.
Yeah.
Should be reserved for the higher beings. Now, and by satisfying the higher being, then everyone else is satisfied. Now, but so it's a good point that you bring up, and it's interesting to have in contemporary times a discussion like this, because we're assuming, at least for the sake of argument, that these creatures do exist, and that so we're having a discussion about it. Like, it's interesting that such a discussion can take place in these times when the existence of such beings is doubted. But the reason they're in the material world at all is kind of like in a prison. Let's say you have a prison. It's not my favorite analogy, but they're prisoners. And some of the prisoners who behave very well, they're given positions in the prison system, as to manage different affairs, to run a library, to do various functions. But that is not the position one wants to be in. One shouldn't want to be a controller in the material world, which is what they are. It's because they have some desire to control, be part of an administrative system. So they're given those positions. An important point for me is what the Vedic texts say is the sacrifice for the present age. And they say it's the sacrifice of congregational chanting of mantras.
Mm-hmm.
I could quote Sanskrit verses from various texts about it, but I hope you accept that in different ages, there are different sacrifices. In the Satya Yuga, the first age, there's a cycle of ages called yugas, beginning with, just like in a year, we have spring, summer, fall, winter. In the cosmic cycles, there's a golden age called Satya Yuga. There, the recommended sacrifice is meditation and yoga. Then, in the next stage, things become a little more deteriorated. So there are sacrifices recommended that do involve, like a horse sacrifice, different sacrifices of that nature. But in that age, what would happen is that the sacrificial animal would be given a new life. And sometimes it might involve, so it wasn't that people were just conducting these things on their own. It was kind of like a state function. And it didn't involve human sacrifice, but it involved sacrifice of specific kinds of animals. And the people who were conducting the sacrifices had the power to give that animal a new body on the spot. So there are descriptions of low-class people who did conduct human sacrifices, but it's not anything that's recommended.